On the morning of June 28, 1914, the city of Sarajevo in Bosnia-Herzegovina awoke to what promised to be a beautiful summer day. The sun rose over the surrounding hills, casting its warm light on the narrow streets and Ottoman-era architecture that gave the city its distinctive character. This was a city of contrasts, where east met west, where minarets stood alongside Catholic churches and Orthodox cathedrals, where the ancient ways of the Balkans collided with the modern ambitions of European empire. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had annexed Bosnia-Herzegovina just 6 years earlier in 1908, a move that had enraged Serbian nationalists who dreamed of a greater South Slavic state that would unite all Serbs under one flag. The annexation had been a humiliation for Serbia, which had been forced to accept it under pressure from the great powers, and the wound had never healed. Now, on this Sunday morning, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, was arriving for an official visit, and the stage was set for an event that would change the world forever. Franz Ferdinand was 50 years old, a man of considerable complexity who defied easy characterization. He was not particularly beloved within the Habsburg court, partly because of his sometimes difficult personality, but more significantly because of his marriage. He had fallen in love with Countess Sophie Chotek, a lady-in-waiting to Archduchess Isabella. But Sophie was not of sufficient royal rank to be considered an acceptable bride for an heir to the throne. Franz Ferdinand had fought for years for the right to marry her, ultimately winning Emperor Franz Joseph's grudging consent only by agreeing to a morganatic marriage, meaning that Sophie could never become empress and their children could never inherit the throne. This arrangement had caused Franz Ferdinand considerable bitterness, as Sophie was frequently subjected to humiliating slights at court functions, forced to enter rooms after lower-ranking royals, and seated far from her husband at official dinners. Sarajevo offered a rare opportunity for the couple to appear together in their full dignity, as Franz Ferdinand would be acting in his military capacity, as Inspector General of the Armed Forces, rather than as heir apparent, which meant the strict court protocols could be relaxed and Sophie could stand beside him as his wife. Neither of them could have known that this would be their last day together, or that they would die within minutes of each other, or that their deaths would serve as the spark that ignited a war that would kill millions. The choice of June 28th for the visit was extraordinarily provocative, though whether by design or thoughtless ignorance remains debated by historians. June 28th was Vidovdan, St. Vitus Day, the most important date in Serbian national consciousness. On June 28, 1389, the Serbian army had been defeated by the Ottoman Turks at the Battle of Kosovo, beginning 5 centuries of Ottoman domination, but also creating a powerful mythology of Serbian martyrdom and resistance. For Serbian nationalists, Vidovdan was a day of both mourning and defiance, a day when Serbian pride burned brightest. For the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne to parade through a majority Serbian city on this date in full military regalia was seen by many as a deliberate insult, a reminder of Serbian subjugation. Whether Franz Ferdinand himself was aware of the significance of the date is unclear, but the military and civilian officials who had planned the visit certainly should have been. The security arrangements for the visit were remarkably lax, almost criminally so. The Archduke would travel through the city in an open car, exposed and vulnerable, along a route that had been published in newspapers days in advance. The local police force, numbering only about 120 officers for the entire city, would provide security with minimal support from the military. No special precautions had been taken, despite warnings from Serbian officials that such a visit might provoke violence. The governor of Bosnia, General Oskar Podjorek, who was responsible for the visit's organization, seemed either oblivious to the danger or arrogantly confident that no one would dare attack the imperial heir. This confidence would prove catastrophically misplaced. Unknown to the Austrian authorities, a conspiracy was already in motion. A group of young Bosnian Serb revolutionaries, members of a nationalist organization called Young Bosnia, had decided that Franz Ferdinand's visit presented an opportunity too valuable to miss. The group was led by a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, along with several companions including Nedeljko Chabrinovic, Trifko Grabej, Mohamed Mehmed Basic, Vaso Chubrilovic, and Shvetko Popovic. These were not hardened terrorists or experienced assassins, but rather idealistic young men, most of them still teenagers or barely out of their teens, who had been radicalized by nationalist rhetoric and dreamed of striking a blow for Serbian freedom. They had obtained their weapons, 4 pistols and 6 bombs, from a Serbian nationalist organization called the Black Hand, a shadowy group with connections to Serbian military intelligence. The Black Hand was led by Colonel Dragutin Dimitrijevic, known by the codename Apis, who commanded Serbia's military intelligence service. The degree to which the Serbian government itself was involved in the plot remains one of history's unresolved questions, but at minimum, elements within the Serbian military establishment had provided material support to the assassins. The young conspirators had practiced with their weapons and made their plans, but they were amateurs, nervous, and uncertain. On the morning of the 28th, they positioned themselves at intervals along the Apple Quay, the main boulevard that ran alongside the Miljacka River, where the Archduke's motorcade would pass. The plan was simple. As the cars drove by, the assassins would throw their bombs or fire their pistols at the Archduke's vehicle. If the first man failed, the second would try, and so on down the line. It was crude but potentially effective, given the open nature of the cars and the lack of security. As the morning wore on and the time for the Archduke's arrival approached, the conspirators waited in the crowd of onlookers, their weapons hidden beneath their clothes, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and revolutionary fervor. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie arrived at the railway station at 9:28 a.m. and were greeted by General Photorealistic and other officials. The Archduke wore the light blue tunic and green feathered cap of an Austrian cavalry officer, his chest decorated with medals and the distinctive Order of the Golden Fleece. Sophie wore a white dress and carried a white parasol against the sun. They inspected a military honor guard, then climbed into the second car of a 6-vehicle motorcade, an open Graf and Stift double phaeton. General Podiorek sat beside them, while the car's owner, Count Franz von Harrach, sat in the front passenger seat, and the driver, Leopold Loika, was at the wheel. The motorcade set off through the city, moving at a moderate pace so that the crowds lining the streets could see the imperial visitors. The security was virtually non-existent. No motorcycles flanked the car, no bodyguards ran alongside, no advance team had swept the route. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie simply rode through the streets of a city filled with people who had every reason to hate what they represented, completely exposed to whatever might come. The motorcade reached the Apple Quay at approximately 10:10 a.m. As the cars proceeded along the Riverside Boulevard, they passed Mohamed Mehmed Basic, the first of the conspirators positioned along the route. Mehmed Basic, holding a bomb, watched the Archduke's car approach and then drive past. He did nothing. Whether he lost his nerve or whether he judged the circumstances unfavorable for an attack, he later claimed that a policeman was standing too close to him, preventing him from acting. The motorcade continued. Minutes later, the vehicles approached Nedeljko Chabrinovic, the second conspirator. Chabrinovic was 18 years old, a printer's apprentice from a poor family who had developed tuberculosis and had perhaps concluded he had nothing to lose. As the Archduke's car drew near, Chabrinovic struck the percussion cap of his bomb against a lamppost to activate it, then hurled it at the car. The driver, Leopold Loika, saw the projectile coming and accelerated. Franz Ferdinand, with remarkable reflexes, raised his arm and deflected the bomb, which bounced off the folded roof of the car and landed in the street. The bomb exploded under the following vehicle, seriously wounding several people, including Lieutenant Colonel Erich von Maritzi and Sophie's lady-in-waiting, Countess Sophie von Lonius. Fragments of shrapnel hit some of the spectators as well. Chabrinovic swallowed a cyanide capsule, which was either defective or too old to be effective, and then jumped into the Miljacka River, which at that point was only about 4 inches deep. He was immediately captured by police and onlookers, beaten severely, and dragged away for interrogation while vomiting from the failed poison.
The motorcade accelerated after the explosion, rushing to reach the town hall where an official reception was scheduled. The other conspirators along the route, shocked by the sudden speed of the passing vehicles and confused by the smoke and chaos from the explosion, did not act. Gavrilo Princip, standing near the Latin Bridge, watched the cars race past before he could attempt anything. At the town hall, Franz Ferdinand was furious. The mayor, Fehim Effendi Churchic, had begun to deliver his prepared welcoming speech, apparently unaware of what had just happened. "Mr. Mayor, I come here on a visit and I get bombs thrown at me. It is outrageous," the Archduke interrupted angrily. General Photorealistic, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, assured Franz Ferdinand that the bomber had been captured and that the rest of the visit could proceed safely. After the brief ceremony, a discussion took place about what to do next. The original plan called for the motorcade to proceed to the National Museum, but Franz Ferdinand insisted on going to the hospital to visit those who had been injured in the bombing. Sophie insisted on accompanying him, despite suggestions that she should remain somewhere safe.